Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial, and today I want to talk about Clayxels. And if you don't know what it is, it's a Unity plugin that allows for volumetric modeling directly inside of Unity. It might sound complex, but it's really not. I'm going to put on screen a bunch of examples of stuff I did with it, and I'm going to put a link to the plugin in the description. Here is a store page just for you to check out, and yeah, I really recommend it. And today we are going to try and do this character. So it's a Roald, it's a character from Animal Crossing. I did this for this tutorial, and I really want to use this character as a way to explain a lot of different concepts of Clayxel, but also volumetric modeling, like not specific to Clayxel. And I'm not sure it's going to fit in one part, so it might be multiple. But yeah, anyway, let's go. So let's start, and I really advise you to gather some reference and always work with reference, because it's a big help. And so I gathered some reference of the character here, as you can see, and I'm using a soft called PureRef. I'm going to put the link in the description if it interests you. For now, I'm just going to put them on the side here, so I always have them available. And this is what we are going to try and do, just the head, okay, because the head is mainly spheres, and I think it's very easy to start with such a simple shape. And I'm just going to delete it, sorry, and we are going to right click, create 3D object and Clayxel container. Of course, you need to have Clayxels in your project for this option to appear. So let's start. So once you click here, you will have a Clayxel container and you will see a gizmo in your scene. And this gizmo represents the bounds in which you can sculpt. And I will go more into detail later, but for now, let's just start with the head. And follow along, some stuff might not make sense, but I'm sure it will after some time. So we are just going to select our container and hit add clay. And now we have a cube in the center of our little container. We can move it, rotate it, or even scale it, just using Unity transform tools. But I'm just going to reset it, and instead of having a cube, I'm going to have a sphere, okay? If you select the object that was just created, you can access all its property, meaning the color, the solid type, other options that are dependent on the type of primitive you are using, and then all the blend options that we're going to see just a bit after. So I'm just going to take a sphere and then pick a nice blue color that looks like the one from the character, so maybe this one. And I'm going to scale up the sphere pretty big, not too big, because if you go too far, you will see that it starts to get clipped, but we don't want that. So we are going to scale it just a bit before the bounds, okay? And right now we're on the sphere, so we have some specific option just for the sphere, and we have this slice Y option, okay? And if we just play with it, so I'm just clicking and dragging along, you will see that it starts to like basically slice the sphere, okay? So if I type in 50, it just slices half of the sphere. If I type 80, it's like 80% of the sphere is clipped. So I think for what we want to do, I'm going to go somewhere around there. And then there is this round option, which is really handy on almost all primitive, I think. It can basically smoothen out your primitive. So I'm just going to smooth it out something like this. And I think we have a pretty good shape already. Maybe play a bit with the scaling. I will let you just play how you want. You don't have to copy my exact values. But I think this is okay for now. So this is the base shape of the head. And what we're going to do is we want now to create the eyes, okay? And the eyes are super simple. They are just circles. So what we are going to do is just click on the clay container. And we are just going to add clay. So we have a new object that has been created, and if you look into the hierarchy, you will see we have a new cube. And even if you don't see it in the scene, it might just be because it's behind our sphere. So if you select it and move it, you know, there, then we see our cubes. One thing I want to make sure before we continue is I want you to look into your gizmo on the top right of your scene and make sure the red axis, so the X axis, is pointing on the right, like this, okay? This is important because we are going to use some mirror option, and they only works that way for now. So let's go back to our clay object. We are just going to create a sphere, so not a cube, because we want to recreate this shape, and a sphere is perfect for this. And I'm going to place this sphere approximately where the height is. But what we want is not like a big sphere like this. We just want a nice circle on the head. And one super option for this is a painter option. So still with my clay object selected, I go into the inspector And in options, I'm going to click there and select painter. And when I click this, what happens is basically now I'm painting the clay with this object. So it's like projecting only the colors. So now if I change the colors, you can see I'm just like applying the colors. It's really cool just to add some texture details. And if you go into the option and click again on painter, now it's back to being a more solid object. So what we want is having painter, and I'm just going to pick a white color. And of course he has two eyes, not one. So one thing we could do would be to duplicate the object, like right click or duplicate, or just as I prefer to do, Control D, and then move the object on the left. But this would not be super handy in the long run, because I mean every time you want to do a change, you have to go back and adjust both of them. So what we are going to do is just select your eye here, and just in the option, we have painter, but we also have mirror. And if we click on mirror X, what happens is basically the sphere we have is being mirrored on the X axis. And this is why I was giving you a warning before about the axis, because if you cross the middle of your container, because this is relative to the container, then the object disappears. So maybe there will be option in the future to change it, but for now, this is how it is. So make sure you have your x-axis on the right and your object on the right part of the container. And now we can just tweak a bit the position and the scaling to have what would look like the eyes of the character. And I think this is okay for now. Okay, that's good. And one thing with Clayxels is that nothing is destructive, so we can always go back later and change it, you know. So one thing I can do now is create a new object for the black of the eyes. So the long way would be go back to your container, add clays, and now I have a cube, and then I can create a sphere, put it black. Anyway, this is super long. Like what I prefer to do is I can just select my sphere that already has a nice property, it's painter and everything, it's almost at the right place. I will just duplicate it, put it black, and just scale it down. And already you can see it was super fast. We can just move it around to create a cute look. I'd let you handle your look on your side, but I think this is okay for now. And we can even go back because I'm not super happy with the color of the blue. Just select the sphere and then change the color. And you can also start like naming stuff if you want, but that's for now. We won't bother with this. So I think the head is like the head itself is almost done. And what we can do is if we go back to the Clayxels container, we can change the details. So because if you zoom in, you will see that we have some artifacts, and if you zoom really close, you will see that it's actually just a bunch of circles, because this is the way Clayxels render geometry. And if we change the Clayxels details on the Clayxels container, if we lower it, you will see that those circles get bigger and bigger. That means that the clay is now more optimized, of course, but it's not really what we want for this character. We want a very detailed and a cute look, so we are just going to increase it. And by default, it's around 80. We can push it up to 100, but you will see that your object might disappear, and like, don't worry, this is normal. Like if I select my clay container, you will see that my bounds have shrinked because the bounds are related to your Clayxels details, okay? So by default, it was 88, so this is how my bounds look. And if I increase the details up to 100, like my object gets now out of the bounds. So this is why your object disappears. And one way to fix that would just be to go on the bound scales and you just click the plus button, and now you have a bigger bound. You have to be careful though, because the bigger your bounds and your details, the more heavy it will be on your computer. So what I advise is like, don't try to sculpt all the time being at 100% details. Like I like to sculpt around 80 or 50, because that way it's more manageable for my computer. And then once you want to do, sorry, your renders or whatever, then you can put 100 details. But you know what, I'm just going to put 80, yeah, 90, because I think it's nice. And I'm just going to rename this to head. And we are done with the head, and now we are going to create the beak. And what we could do is just create a new object and create the beak directly in the head. But I will show you why it's not a good solution. So let's just take the head, and if I add a clay, so I have a cube in the middle, and let's say this is a beak. Like we are not going to do this, but I'm just going to show you why we are going to do it differently. If I have a beak here, like if I start to mess with the blend, you will see that my beak start to blend with my head. But like if you look at the reference, what we want is a really like clear cut, like almost a different object. But with within a clay container, you don't really have a way to separate objects, like everything will blend, so you have to be careful about that. So one easy way to do that is just to create more container, and it's actually more optimized. So what we're going to do is just right-click on the scene, 3D object, and then Clayxels container, and we are just going to call it beak. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to around where the clay would be. I'm also going to scale it down so I have more detail on my beak. So you can be approximate, it's not like an exact science. So here is good. And what I'm going to do, just add clay. So now you have a cube there. And first of all, I'm going to pick a nice color. So something like a yellow orangish color, just look at your reference. This is what I like about Clayxels, is that when you see a shape, you have to think about how will I create it with only the primitive I have available. So I think for the beak, we are going to use a sphere again, because the sphere is very handy. You can do a lot of stuff with it. And I'm going to scale it up a bit and squish it down. And I'm going to play again with a slice. And I'm going to slice it around here. Maybe scale it on the Z-axis. And already it's starting to look good. Maybe a bit bigger, adjust the position. It's a bit too low, yeah, something like this. And it's not perfect, but it's a base. If we look at the reference more closely, you will see that the beak has a more pointy shape. And right now it's very round. So you have multiple ways to deal with this. And what we are going to do is just select the beak. I'm going to add a new clay. So it had a cube in the middle. I can move it around and bring it closer to the beak. And now we are going to talk about those buttons here. If you select a clay object, you will see that you have a blend. Like this is a slider that can go from 0 to 100. And you have two buttons like add and sub. And you might have already guessed what they do. But if I am in sub mode, what I'm doing is I'm subtracting. So everywhere I move, I will just remove what clay is already there. And if I'm in add mode, I'm just adding clay. And when you change this blend slider, if you are at 0, it means you have like an infinitely sharp blend. But if I start to move this slider up, you will see it blends really smoothly and really nicely with the surroundings. And it blends the shape and the color, which is really cool. And this is what makes Clayxels and volumetric modeling really fun, is this kind of, interactions. And it works the other way around, of course. Like if I subtract with a very sharp blend, this is what happens. But if I go with a higher blend, I get some very interesting result. And you can see already with just like one cube and one sphere, we can have like infinite amount of shape. And this is how you get like very complex shape. You just keep blending shapes together until you have like interesting shapes. Back to our cube. What I want is, let's go back to the add and 0. So it's just a bit easier to see. And I'm just going to rotate it something like this to create like the point of the beak. And I'm going to go into the options and then my mirror. So what happened now is I have two copies of my cube. Okay, can I move it? And the good thing is that now, whatever I do, it will never blend with the head, okay, because it's two different containers. Like this is really important. And I'm going to take my cube and put it in subtractive mode. So if I do that, what happens? It subtracts from the spheres. But if I increase the blend, look what happened. I get a very nice rounded blend. And now I can go back to the cube and the move tool and move it around and really refine the shape I want. And you can see how this is very powerful, and like it can take some time and some practice to get used to working with just primitive and the mirror and the adding and subtracting, but you will get it really fast. And one thing you can notice is that we have a bit of red around the beak. It's because I was playing with the color before. And as I said, it's, the blending blends the shape and the color. So ideally, we want the exact same color on the sphere and on the cube, so we don't actually see the blending. And one way of doing that, we can just go back to the sphere, copy the color, right click on it, and then go back to our cube and then paste the color. So this is pretty good. But what I don't like is you see the shape in the bottom. It's not looking really good. So what I can do, I'm just going to duplicate my cube, because I think it's easier to just duplicate than going back to the clay container, then add clay and changing all the stuff. I'm just going to duplicate my cube, and it still has all the same parameters, but I'm going to remove the mirror because I don't need it. So now it's only one cube, and I'm going to reset the transform. So if I right click and then reset, what happened is that my cube gets back to 0, 0 with a scale of 1, 1, 1, and it's very handy. So now I'm just going to move it here and then scale it a lot, okay, and then put the blend really down so I have a very sharp blend. Not that down, maybe, yeah, something around 13 is good. And now if I move up and down this cube, you will see that I'm just cutting the bottom half of the beak. And I can go back to my sphere and then maybe scale it up. I can even go back to my cube, rotate it to adjust, you know, like the shape of the beak. Okay, this is looking good. And what we are going to do now is just add the little nostrils. I'm not sure how they're called, but let's go with the beak and add clay. So now I have a new cube. And I'm going to change this shape to a sphere, scale it down, put a mirror X, so that way I have two of them perfectly mirrored. Maybe scale it down, yeah, just a bit like this, rotate it, and then place it around here. And I can just change the blend to a subtractive blend and change the value of the blend to something like this. And put, I'm not going to put a black color because it's just like an artistic choice. I think it looks better like a dark yellow, yeah, something like this. And I'm just going to play a bit around with the shape, like I squish the sphere a bit so it's not like as a, you know, deep hole. Something like this looks nice. Can rotate it. I will let you play with it, like do as you want, but as you can see we have a nice looking beak. Yeah, you can play forever with this thing and tweak it forever. It's really cool. I think it's too big. So yeah, so now we have one part of the beak, and to do the lower part, we are going to just take a shortcut and duplicate the beak. So right click, duplicate, and I'm going to call this lower, if I can type, lower beak. If I move it, now you see I have two like copies of my beak. We can remove the sphere, the last sphere, which is basically the hole, because we don't need it. And I'm just going to take the thing and rotate it, like by 180, and then moving up, and then scale it down. And now I have a beak. One thing I can advise you to not do is scale non-uniformly, because if you do that, you will see some weird stuff happen with your clay. So try to keep to uniform scaling if possible. And so now we have like pretty much done with the head, and I'm going to just go and adjust some of the proportion, because I'm not super happy with how the eyes look, but this is a good thing with Clayxels, like you can always go back. I think the beak is too high. I'm going to put a timestamp if you just want to skip the part where I just mess with the clay for a while. Yeah, I think the sphere is not, I'm not too happy with the shape of the head. I think I'm going to squish it a bit more, and it just looks dumb right now. I'm just going to remove the eyes, something like this. Yeah, the head is way too large. I think this is good. And for the eyes, I'm just going to, I think, yeah, they're too far. Yeah, what I'm doing is definitely not Clayxels related. Now it's more like how to sculpt a character, but just tell me what you would like to see in those kind of video. I'm not sure yet. And yeah, I'm just going to make the beak a bit closer, and I'm just going to call this done for now. Yeah, pretty happy with it. So that was just the head. To be honest, all the rest is going to be mainly the same exact techniques. We are just going to use more shapes and more like funky blending stuff, but basically it's, now you know everything about Clayxels just to make characters. So this was not planned, but you know what, let's try and do the little orange, because I think it's super cute, and also it's a good way to make sure you understood everything. So I'm just going to right click, create a new clay container. I'm just going to go a bit more fast because I think now you're all experts. So let's call it orange. And what I'm going to do is just move it up. And I guess you can understand why I'm doing another clay container is because I don't want this orange to merge with the head, okay? And I scale it down just to have a bit more detail. I'm going to add some clay, take a sphere. It's going to be orange, of course. Just trying to figure out the size. I think, yeah, this is good. I'm going to move up the clay because the clay container because I was almost getting out of bound. I think this looks good. I'm going to slice just the bottom a bit, so I have a nice flat bottom and increase the roundness. And like this might not seem like a big change, but it's actually it's really important, you know, like if you don't change any of it and just keep perfect shapes, like your stuff will not look as good as it could. So yeah, it's really important to just refine your shape and try to get away from just perfectly round shape or a perfect tube or whatever. Anyway, also if you look into the reference, you know, the top of the orange is a bit flat. So like before, there are like thousands of ways to do that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate the sphere because it already has the correct color and put it as a cube. And I'm just going this cube as a subtractive mode to just remove a bit of the orange like this. And you see, the more sharp my blend is, the more, you know, harsh cut I have. But if I increase the blend, I can, you know, get I can basically sculpt how I want it. And I think this is good. And yeah, I'm just going to duplicate the sphere again, scale it down, put it in subtract mode. And then I think I'm going to do something very light like this. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but I have a slightly like dent here. And I'm going to do the, how do you call this? I don't know. I'm going to duplicate my sphere again. It's going to be in add mode, remove a lot of the blend, lower the blend, sorry. And let's put it, I don't know, a dark green maybe. Let's try a brown. And let's try with paint to see how it looks. You can also blend the paint, of course. Didn't say it before. And I'm going to duplicate it again, change the color. I think it's okay. It's not perfect. I'm not super happy with it. Yeah, I think, you know, one of the issues is that the orange looks still perfectly round. And like you can see in the reference, there are some like volume on it, something like this. Not sure how we can do this because I want to keep using like spheres and cube for now. But you know what? Let's try. It's a fun challenge. I'm going to duplicate the sphere. I'm going to squish it really low, really thin like this. And let's just try to blend it. And I think it should create something. Yeah, it's not bad. I think it's a bit too high. Okay, that's it. I'm just going to duplicate it a few more times to get some details. It might seem really subtle and like nobody will see it, but I can assure you like it does make a difference. Okay, this is good. And I'm just going to add a last object on the top here, not in paint mode. Something like this. I think that's more than enough, you know. And one little trick I like to do is like, I like using the paint mode to create some fake lighting. So I just duplicated my sphere. So you see I have another sphere here. I'm just going to put it blue so you see. I'm going to scale it really big and then put it in painter mode. So now the whole orange is blue. So it's not an orange anymore. And if I go down, you will see I have I'm just painting the bottom of the orange blue. And if I increase my blend, what happens is that I'm having this very smooth blend of color in the bottom, which is really nice. And I like to use this to create some kind of, you know, fake ambient occlusion, or just to basically color my objects with a prettier lighting. And then I just duplicated it, sorry, and then put a white, yellowish color in paint mode. And I think this is enough for the orange for now. So hey, if you managed to get this far, this is what you should have. A cute little head with an orange, I guess. And there was a lot to cover in this video, but we only scratched the surface. We saw how Clayxels containers interact with each other. We saw how to use spheres, slicing. We saw some additive and subtractive blending. We even saw some painting and mirroring. Like it's all very basic, but only with those options you can already do like an infinite amount of things. And I'm not sure how I'm going to split those videos, but I think the next part is going to be about the body, and then one last part about the legs and the arms. I know you are going to ask me about the lighting and how I do my process and my scene setup. Like, this will come in a specific video because it's not related to Clayxels, I'm sorry. But this will come, don't worry. And I will also do like more like Clayxels video about how to maximize your details in a sculpt. If you have any ideas of videos, whether it's about Clayxels or Unity or whatever, just ask me in the comments. I will be happy to answer. So I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.